Hey guys, it's Ravencrow, providing you all with a game review. Now, just as a quick disclaimer, I don't really consider myself to be a great video game reviewer because I don't have a program to record gameplay footage, nor do I consider my format for reviewing things to be that professional. It's just going to be a cheap video with several pictures, random background music, and me talking about the game itself. Now, with that said, I hope you enjoy the review. The game I'm going to be reviewing is Nights in the Nightmare for the Nintendo DS. It was developed by Sting, who traditionally makes quirky and unusual games. Still though, this game deserves some recognition because it has some of the most unique gameplay features that you're ever going to find, especially for the handheld market. The game is best described as a strategy RPG, but in reality, it's kind of in a genre of its own because it mixes several other elements from other genres with it, such as real-time battling with action shooting, so many other things basically. Be prepared for what I'm going to be saying about the gameplay, because it does get pretty complex. The large bulk of the game takes place during the battles, and in those battles you control a wisp by using the DS's touchscreen. With the wisp, you pretty much control everything that goes on. You'll mostly be doing tasks such as awakening the souls of the dead knights, giving them weapons for them to attack with, ordering them where to attack the enemies and what pattern they should attack them with, switching in between modes to make sure they're attacking properly, picking up any items that you might find, and a few other techniques, all under a time limit. Once the time's up, the turn is over, but things don't quite end right there, as you have to choose which enemies will appear in the next turn by entering them through a slot machine. Also, in between these turns, you will enter in the battle menu where you have to customize what's going to happen in the next turn, such as which knights and weapons you're going to be using. This is important because all of the knights are different, and all of the weapons can only be used by certain knights. In addition, some of the weapons will break after being used so much after a while, so you have to use another weapon. So anyways, once you customized everything in the battle menu, you proceed on to the next turn. Basically, you have to eliminate as many enemies as you can during each turn. You can do this in two ways. You can either directly control the knight and tell them where to attack, or you can give them a weapon and they'll charge up and attack the enemies with great power. You do have to be careful though, because the enemies will try to attack the wisp, which guides these knights into doing these things. Whenever the wisp takes damage, you will lose even more time during the turn, so be sure you get attacked as minimal as possible. Now, there are a few more things I can tell you about the gameplay, but what I've been telling you for the past 2 minutes or so is only the basic gist of it. This game is extremely complex, even for a strategy RPG. You have to make sure you understand everything at all times. The good news is that the game features a tutorial mode, which is very informative and a little too long, but it will help you out a lot. So I recommend that you go through this tutorial mode before you even start playing the game. Now, regarding the storyline for Nights in the Nightmare, it's pretty much as complicated as the gameplay. But to sum it all up, you play as a wisp, which is actually the soul of a dead king named King Wilmgard. He was also known as the Lionheart King for being so brave out in the battlefields. His soul was released by Maria, who is a mysterious warrior having her own intentions on what she must do. And during the course of the game, there is increased tension between Asgard, which is the game's version of heaven, and the underworld. In fact, most of the enemies that you fight against are creatures from the underworld. The story itself covers the past and the present, all done to fill in the gaps of the complex setup of the whole plot. Unfortunately, many of the characters are not worth mentioning. Some of them have no personality whatsoever, and others are pretty much stereotypical versions of Japanese RPG characters. there's also very little character interaction to speak of. If you're a big fan of games where the characters are the main focal point of the plot, you're going to be disappointed with Nights in the Nightmare. I felt the game's storyline was pretty good, but I felt they could have done a better job to make it more interesting to follow. The graphics are impressive here. The entire game is in 2D, so there won't be any 3D graphics to speak of, but regardless, everything is very well detailed. The sprites are pretty nice, the backgrounds are very good, and the artistic direction is simply amazing. While it is true that the game kinda looks like a GBA game, the special effects and the designs overall still make Nights in the Nightmare a pretty good game to look at. As good as the graphics are, the sound in this game is even better. The music mostly consists of progressive rock and synthesized score pieces, and it all fits very well into the game's atmosphere. There are a few pieces that don't really stand out much, but some of them will catch your interest immediately once you first hear it. The sound effects are pretty good, and there are a lot of them during the cutscenes and the battles, so at least there is nothing disappointing to speak of here. And lastly, the voice acting is pretty decent. You'll only be hearing them during the battles, but you won't even notice them that much because you're focusing more on the battling. A few of the lines do sound a little fake, but it's not that big of an issue. Bottom line, Nights in the Nightmare is a pretty good game. It's obviously not without its flaws though, and here are some of them that I will be speaking of. First off, the game has a very steep learning curve. I mentioned earlier that the gameplay is very complex, and it is true. Even though the tutorial mode does mention what you need to know, it will take you at least a half hour just to get the basic gist of the whole game. Another minor issue with the game is that it can get very repetitive at times. All you do is constant battling and not much else. Hell, once you beat the game, there are very few extras to unlock. Sure, there are multiple endings and different difficulty settings, but really that's it. While this game does have a good challenge, it is not for everybody. If you can't enjoy strategy RPGs or any game that has a tactical aspect to it, you're likely not going to enjoy this game. Still, Nights in the Nightmare offers up a very unique gameplay experience, and if you're up for a challenging game that has a lot of strategy involved, I highly advise you to give Nights in the Nightmare a go. I myself would give this game an 8 out of 10.